I know you hinted to this earlier, but machine consciousness, uh, this has been the big thing lately. But um, do you think then that according to AST, can we possibly build machines that can also be conscious?
Yes, I think we can. I think there's nothing to stop that. There's nothing in the way. I think it's going to happen if it hasn't already happened. Uh, I think that uh, if you think of consciousness as a thing that you either have or don't, it's like, essentially, if you think of it in that traditional magicalist way, it gets very hard to tell. But when you think of the sort of suite of um, abilities or processes that underlie our consciousness, and then you see how they may exist perhaps in simpler form in other systems, then you start seeing this sort of slidey gradient. It's almost like when people talk about tool use, people are tool users, and then they discovered chimps are tool users, and then it turns out otters are, and then it turns out ants use tools, and all kinds of creatures use tools at some level in some way. And it gets very hard to just draw a line in and say everything before this, no tools, everything after this, tools. I think consciousness is going to work the same way. Like the basic components can be there. And then it gets very hard to tell what the right line to draw in to say, no, we'll call these conscious and these not. So I think computer systems have already been built that have some of these components, right? Computer systems have been built with attention, with good control over their attention, and with models of their own attention, and so on. So something like the really sophisticated large language models that are out there now, like ChatGPT, this is super interesting to me. I don't know what I don't know what's in there. Um, I think nobody does. I mean, that's in a sense the point of having these deep learning neural network models is that you train them, but you don't know on the inside of the black box what the training did. All you know is how it behaves. But ChatGPT is very good at social interaction, and it appears to have some kind of theory of mind to understand other people and make inferences about what other people might be thinking. And so that's very intriguing to me. I think that kind of system also has some of these components. Whether we want to say it, I mean, we don't want to say it has human-like consciousness, but maybe it will soon. But it has some of these components. So where do you draw the line in? I don't know. It's hard to study that. But at some point, yes, machines relatively soon will have the stuff that we think of. It will think it is conscious in the same way that we think we are, and it will attribute consciousness to others in the same way that we attribute consciousness to others.
Yeah, I think like you say, the important thing is not to conflate it with those human things, not to stipulate that it needs to have emotions and all those things for us to understand it as being conscious.
Right. So we don't know what its self model is. But I think it can probably attribute some of the same. So when I look at you and I attribute consciousness to you, what am I doing? I'm saying, well, you're aware of me, you're aware of a particular thought, but you're not aware of, I don't know, something else. You're not aware of what you can't see behind my computer, but you're aware. I can understand what must be in the purview of your conscious mind and what might not be. And so that suggests I have some comprehension of what a conscious mind is, and I can attribute that to you, right? And ChatGPT has that ability. So it has a remarkable ability to talk to other people and figure out what is likely to be in that person's mind or not in that person's mind. And that's very intriguing to me, how much how at the high level at which it performs.
This might be a trivial question, but do you think we're going to build a conscious machine on purpose, intentionally, or do you think we're just going to build stuff and at some point, some scale, it'll get there?
I don't think it's a matter of scale, and I think we are building them intentionally, although maybe people don't realize that what they're trying to build is the same thing as a conscious mind, right? They want machines that understand people. And as soon as you build a machine that understands people, that can interact with people, that understands what someone else's mind is, there you have a machine that understands what consciousness is, at least the same way I understand your consciousness. The machine understands someone else's consciousness. And that's for social, user interface. Like, people are trying to do that. It's no accident. How the machine understands itself is more tricky right now. But to build machines that are more socially competent, I think they need models of themselves as well to be able to interact well with other people. So I think it's people are intentionally driving in that direction. It's not just build a more complicated and then the magic-y thing comes out of it. I think it's specifically people are trying to do that.
Right. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. I didn't mean to imply that scalable equal consciousness. But do you think there's some sort of computational advantage to having a conscious AI system, and thereby that provides a design incentive to people who are building these systems?
Yeah, if we're right, yes, because that's the whole point, right? This mechanism evolved. There's two huge advantages to it, probably others, but one is it allows you to control your own attention better. So it follows what's sometimes considered the fundamental principle of control engineering, which is, if you want to control something, have a model of it. So if you want to control your own attention, have a model of it, right? And so it would be hugely beneficial to any machine that has attention, that is able to deploy its computational resources to be more efficient by focusing on this limited set of items or that limited set. And to be able to control that attention, it would be enormously advantageous for it to have a good model of its own attention, right? So right off the bat, huge advantage. And second, if you want machines to interact and interface with people, again, huge advantage to being able to model the attention of others, not just your own attention, but of others. So it's the same reasons why these kinds of things would have evolved in animals and ultimately in us, would make them enormously useful for machine learning.
Right. How do you feel about this? So, are you excited about the prospect? Are you sorry, I know this is way off into speculation, but
yeah. No, this is just very interesting question. I don't know. I think consciousness is less than what most people in the general public think it is. Right? Because most people think, oh my God, if it's conscious, that means suddenly it can become autonomous. Oh, but they already are, or, oh my God, it can suddenly make decisions on its own. They already do. And so on, right? They already have all those capacities. Or people think, oh my God, if it's conscious, that means it can remember things from its past. I mean, come on, computers have had memory forever. So what is it that the consciousness piece adds? That's what AST addresses. It's really important, but it's really specific. It's not giving it the ability to be autonomous and to make decisions and so on and so on. It's giving it something else. It's giving it a good model of what attention is. And that model is really useful for this specific reason and that specific reason and so on. So a consciousness in that sense, I think, is not the gigantic, huge, scary thing that to give a machine that most people in the general public would think. It's kind of an incremental advance. I mean, it's a huge advance in some ways, but it's also an incremental advance to give them that capacity. So in that sense, I'm less scared of it. I think large language models already have some degree of modeling other people's attention. I think that's probably there. And I think that, to me, the scariest thing, people are scared to death of AI right now. I think a lot of that is hype, and a lot of that is because you get a lot of attention by beating on that drum. But to me, the scariest thing about AI is not what AI will do to us. It's what really well-moneyed people who can buy the resources can do with it. Because AI already is at the heart of shaping the opinions of people in the public. Like AI algorithms are at the root of huge political shifts in opinion all over the world. And if you have the money and resources to buy it, then you can influence public opinion and political opinion in ways that can be incredibly damaging. So that's what scares me about it.
Right. I think it was, I forget who, but I think it was Yoshua Bengio recently who said, I may be wrong about this, so sorry if I am, but the idea that the real threat of AI right now is the misinformation it can generate and how that can be exacerbated and used against us.
Yeah, totally. And it's misinformation, and it's knowing how to manipulate people's buttons, right? So all you need to do is train a giant neural network on how to pump out the right pieces of information in order to get the response it wants from a shift in public opinion. Like, it can see the relationship between those two, and so you train it to give you the effect you want, and suddenly you're pushing political opinion polls by 2, 3, 5 percentage points, and it becomes enough to change the politics of the world.
Right. This I think is really, really important for people to understand, that it's not about dystopian future imagery. It's just power structures. It's all about how these tools will be manipulated politically.
Yeah. Yep. It's people in the end. It's not the evil AI. It's the evil people. That's the problem.
Right. It's the thing that we've been hopefully repeating over and over again. That consciousness is not the same thing as emotions or all these other human things. These are still human problems to solve.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you find conscious machines to be posing an ethical question? So is the fact of a machine being conscious a reason for us to treat it ethically? Is consciousness some sort of dividing line between how we should ethically act towards something or not?
I think it's tricky, right? So one ethical consideration that I'm not as compelled by is, let's say you build a conscious machine. Is it right to turn it off? Is it right to damage it? Is it right to kill it? Or a machine, right? But the problem for me is that the reason why people don't want to die is not because we're conscious. It's because we built with certain emotional machinery inside of us. And consciousness may interact with that, right? But if you build a machine that doesn't have emotionality, it could still have a conscious experience, right? It could still have these attention mechanisms and attention schemas, and it could still think like we do. I have a subjective experience of the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean the machine wants to be alive and is scared of dying and suffers and all these other emotional components, right? You would have to build that into it. So you build a machine that has those kinds of human-like emotions, or let's say mammalian-type emotions, so that it's scared of dying. Then we have a conversation about the ethics of treatment and harm and life and death of the machines. Like, then it starts to make sense to me. But I think what happens is, again, people inflate consciousness into something larger than it really is. And so they like to think, oh, if it's conscious, then it has all these other components as well. And now we have to treat it morally or ethically. And I'm not quite as compelled by that argument yet. I mean, we may come to that, but yeah.
Is this a question that comes up from a design perspective? You imagine that just like building a machine that might have consciousness provides a computational advantage, would there be an advantage found in building a system that has the capacity to display emotion and perhaps even feel emotion, if that's even a sensible question?
Yeah. I think that, so first of all, is it even possible? I think yes, ultimately. But right now, almost nothing is known at a granular level about how emotion is represented in the brain, right? Some of the basic circuits are known. So sometimes people distinguish between emotion and feeling, and emotion is in these very basic brainstem circuits that we're not necessarily even aware of. And feeling is, when that those kinds of signals interface with our cerebral cortex, and then it enters into what we call our consciousness and so on. So, but none of that is understood, I think, at a detail that anyone can even begin to approach building, right? So I think we're a long way from addressing that question. But is it possible to build that stuff? Ultimately, eventually, yes. And then we have basically brains, artificial brains that are thinking and feeling like we are. And now you have to worry. Nobody wants to see C-3PO tortured and killed because we all love him. But we reach a point where suddenly that becomes culturally relevant for to solve.
Right, right. We've been taking the term emotion for granted so far in this conversation, and we don't know a lot about it. Like it seems that we know bits and pieces, affect, but the high level cognitive representation of emotions is very poorly understood. It still feels a bit murky.
Right, exactly. It's very, very, it's very murky. So we know a lot about vision, for example, and so we can start to build machines that process the visual world a lot like people do. But emotion, very little in comparison, very little. Yeah. So there is another side to the ethics of AI, which I find interesting. And it basically has to do with the fact that regardless of whether you think it has consciousness or not, people are going to treat it that way. People are going to attribute consciousness to machines, and already do in many instances. And so how people treat machines impacts how people treat other people. And so you have that's something that it seems to me is already here right now, an ethical question for us. And that can be on both. It could be on the good side and the bad side. So there's people. Some of the work we're doing in the lab involves companion chatbots, where people interact with a chatbot and they get to know it and they treat it like a friend, and it's very soothing and it helps them get through their day, and it actually helps with mental health, and it can improve the way people interact with other people, with friends and family. It can have a beneficial effect on social health and mental health in general. That's on the one side. On the other side, you can also imagine that how people interact with AI, if they think it's conscious, if it sort of tunes up their social circuits, and then they use that same tuning on other people. Now you can also see a downside to it. Do people, get very brutal toward other people because they devalued the AI and they got used to treating intelligent agents in a devalued way, right? So,
right, is this a problem that we should be attacking from a design perspective? Like, should people just anticipate how people are going to treat these machines because of how human-like they appear, and then maybe we should artificially limit how human-like they appear?
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how, from a design point of view, I don't know how to address that. But it is certainly true that the more human-like the AI is, the more likely people are to think of it as a conscious agent. And people do already all over the world. People interact with AI, and even people who say, well, I know it's not conscious, but I sort of feel like it is. That's enough. That's enough to start influencing their social behavior and to leak into how they interact with other people. So so from a design perspective, you might just want to be really careful that social AI is built in a way that's really nice to people and doesn't encourage bad behavior.
This is a very speculative question, and I know we just talked about the work on emotions being murky, but there's some work on the relevance of embodiment in emotions again. And relatedly, do you find that cybernetic AI systems that use advantage of cybernetics, because they might be taking advantage of those embodiment principles, you might then think that those systems might be closer or more closely resemble human emotions?
There are a lot of theories about emotions that involve essentially embodiment. That's true. Some of the most sort of classical theories of emotion are that they're rooted in physiological feelings, like sensations in your body, like in your gut, or your heartbeat, or your skin prickling, and that these are these autonomic nervous system responses in the body then get registered in the brain and then interpreted. And what we call emotion is this layer of interpretation on top of that. And if that's true, which actually sounds plausible to me, then you will never have really plausible human-like emotion unless you build a body for the AI, and the body has, whether it's a real physical body or a elaborately simulated body, one or the other, until you build a body that has many of these same kind of physiological functions and feedback, sensory feedback built into them. That sounds plausible to me if one were to try to build emotionality into a machine. I mean, right now, large language models sometimes are taught or trained to have emotion type responses. But I don't know what that really means. Like a human sociopath without any real emotion can mimic certain kinds of emotional states in conversations. And actually, I do worry that we're basically just building giant sociopathic AIs.